There is something rather peculiar about the quiet corners of our lives, isn't there? The nooks and folds of our garments, the things we wear upon our backs and against our skin, these silent companions that clothe our days and warm our nights. Most never consider that the world of spirits, of subtle movements and unseen influences, may very well be threading its way through the very fibers of our wardrobe. And yet, what if I were to tell you that the powers of darkness, clever, covert, and insatiably curious, have discovered how to hide their devices not in the grand and obvious, but in the minute and mundane? That they've learned to stitch their intentions into the hems of your habits and hide their curses in the linings of your life. Of course, such things seem utterly preposterous at first hearing. The modern ear, tutored in rationality and dulled by the persistent humming of convenience and common sense, finds no patience for the idea that evil might live in a pocket or sleep in a sock drawer. And yet, how often the unbelievable is merely the unseen, and the impossible only the unexamined. You see, evil is no lover of the limelight. It prefers curtains and shadows, disguises and delays. It is the master of camouflage. There is a reason why the devil has never bothered to knock on the front door wearing horns and hooves. No, he would much rather slip in wearing a smile, perhaps hidden in the wool of a scarf gifted by someone you never quite trusted, or woven into a charm stitched on the inside of a child's jacket. Witches, after all, are not confined to storybooks and sagas. They are not merely the wild women of the forest, nor the old crones of fireside tales. They are cunning agents of a spiritual rebellion, working under the authority of darkness to shift the lives of men and women subtly toward despair, toward confusion, toward rebellion against the light. And one of their greatest arts is concealment. Now listen carefully, for I speak not out of fable, but from centuries of testimony, of spiritual insight, of the whisperings of conscience, and the wisdom that exists, not in sight, but in awareness. Witches have, for generations, sought out the secret hiding places of ordinary things, using the unnoticed and the ignored to plant their seeds of chaos. The objects they hide are often overlooked precisely because they are familiar. That is their genius. The first is a thread of confusion. It does not appear as anything more than a peculiar string, no different from any tailor's waist, but sewn into the seam of a coat or inserted beneath the collar of a shirt, it begins its work not with a scream, but a whisper. You start forgetting why you came into the room. You begin to question long-held beliefs, not with honest inquiry, mind you, but with a kind of haze that clouds discernment. The line between right and wrong, truth and error becomes smudged. Conversations become riddled with misunderstanding. Your thoughts trip over themselves like dancers without music. This is not coincidence. It is not fatigue. It is a sabotage, cleverly disguised as weariness. The second object is a pin of contention. This is sharper, harder to ignore, but equally cloaked. Often hidden in the hem of a sleeve or inside a trouser leg, it is a spiritual pin, not meant to prick the skin, but the soul. Those who wear it often find themselves increasingly irritated, short-tempered, and argumentative over things that hardly matter. Friendships suffer, marriages fray, church fellowship breaks down into gossip and division, and the person feels justified in it all, never realizing they are being provoked by something hidden, not within their heart, but their habit. It is one thing to disagree with a friend. It is another to suddenly become unable to live at peace with anyone at all. The third is more subtle still, a powder of forgetfulness. This is often sprinkled into the lining of hats, scarves, or the inside of socks. Once present, it dulls spiritual hunger. Passages once cherished in Scripture now seem bland. Prayer becomes tedious. Conviction softens into complacency. The wearer becomes numb, not overtly wicked, just uninterested, unbothered. Drowsy in the soul, It is as if some narcotic for the spirit has been inhaled, though no scent betrays it, and many sleepwalk into ruin, not knowing they have been anesthetized by a dust too fine to see, but not too fine to affect. Now, you may say, surely this is superstition, some medieval fable resurrected by paranoia. But I tell you, darkness has only adapted its methods. It has not vanished. And if you do not believe me, ask yourself this: why are so many today listless in spirit? Why do people who once stood tall in virtue now stumble through moral fog? Why do entire households fall into sudden disunity, without a word, without a warning? Are we to believe this is mere chance? Or is it perhaps that something has gotten into the very fabric of our daily lives? The fourth hidden object is the coin of compulsion. A small object indeed, no bigger than a button, often concealed in a jacket pocket or sewn into the edge of a lining. But it is not the coin that does the damage, it is what it carries. For this is a charm that feeds on appetite, specifically on the appetite of the flesh. Those who unknowingly carry it begin to find themselves increasingly drawn to indulgence. Food becomes a crutch, not nourishment. Sexual impulse becomes obsession. Greed creeps in as a virtue disguised as ambition, and the wearer becomes a slave to subtle urges, unable to name their source, ashamed yet unable to stop. This coin does not shout, it murmurs. It does not bind, it tempts. And in so doing, it tethers the soul with invisible chains. And lastly, there is the mirror shard. This is the most dangerous. Hidden usually in decorative accessories, brooches, belt buckles, or even faux gems sewn onto garments, it carries with it the spirit of vanity and self-deception. Not merely pride, though pride is part of it. It is more insidious than that. It distorts perception of self and others. A man may begin to see himself as either greater or worse than he truly is. A woman may look into the eyes of others and see only judgment, even when there is none. This mirror shard warps the soul's lens. It makes correction feel like condemnation. It transforms guidance into manipulation. It causes love to be mistaken for control, and truth to be received as attack. The person becomes a prisoner of self-image, forever tweaking, hiding, adjusting, never content, always performing. Now perhaps you think all this too eerie, too fantastical to be taken seriously, but that, my friend, is the very weapon of the enemy, to convince you he does not exist. And should you believe that, then all the better for him, for you will wear the curse, feel its effects, and never search for its source. But if you do believe, if you dare to suspect that the physical and the spiritual may be intertwined in deeper ways than we know, then there is hope. For no curse remains unbroken where truth is pursued. No charm of witchcraft can stand against the one who seeks wisdom and walks in the light. But you must look. You must become a student of your own surroundings. Examine what you've ignored. Ask questions about things you thought were harmless. Who gave you that scarf you never liked to wear, yet never threw away? Where did that ring come from? The one you wear not out of affection, but out of habit. Why do you sleep better in one coat than another? Why do you feel differently when you wear certain things? The physical world often hums with spiritual echoes. No object is ever just an object. Every material thing carries the mark of its maker or the taint of its tamperer. And witches, real witches, do not ride broomsticks through the night sky. They ride thoughts, habits, symbols, and tokens into the lives of the unsuspecting. They thrive where people forget to care. They operate in the space between awareness and ignorance. So search not only your wardrobe, but your very way of life. And remember, light exposes all hidden things, not with rage or violence, but with quiet certainty. In the end, the only sure defense against what is hidden in darkness is what is born of truth, not superstition, not fear, but truth, naked, noble, and unafraid. It is a strange and unsettling thing to consider that garments, those most intimate of human wrappings, could serve as hosts for spiritual sabotage. And yet, history is not silent on this matter. The ancients understood something modern minds have too hastily discarded, that objects can be carriers not just of bacteria or dust, but of intention. A cloak may be stitched by a tailor, but it may also carry the mood of its maker, the spirit of the one who blessed or cursed it, or the silent command of someone who knows how to speak without words. In the old world, garments were prayed over, robes of priests were consecrated, even handkerchiefs in the days of the apostles were anointed and carried power. It is only in our day that the idea of spiritual residue has been deemed ridiculous, and perhaps that is why it now thrives unchallenged. One must realize that these hidden objects do not cry out for attention. They are quiet tenants. They do not demand, they suggest. They do not strike, they soften, dull, erode. Like water against stone, they wear down the resistance of the soul little by little, and the tragedy is not merely that they exist, but that so few recognize their work until something essential has already been lost. Not a scream, but a sigh, not a fire, but a slow cooling. The soul forgets its warmth, and it blames the season. And you know what is perhaps most dangerous? That many of these objects are gifts, tokens from people we trusted, passed along with a smile, sown with care or even love, but tainted nonetheless. For darkness does not require the hatred of the giver, it only requires the ignorance of the receiver. A cursed object may be given with the purest of intentions. That is part of the strategy. The enemy delights not only in harming the victim, but in confusing the origin of the wound. You see, when pain comes from a known enemy, the response is resistance. But when it seems to come from someone dear, the soul doesn't fight, it questions, it spirals, it weakens. And so these objects pass between friends, between lovers, even between parents and children, not because of malice, but because of spiritual blindness. This is why awareness is not optional. It is essential. You may think it paranoid to scrutinize your surroundings in such a way, but it is not paranoia, it is discernment. There is a difference between fear and vigilance. Fear paralyzes, vigilance protects. A soldier who checks his sword is not afraid, he is prepared. A watchman who surveys the wall is not anxious, he is awake. You must become that kind of soul, awake, discerning, not suspicious of every shadow, but wise to the fact that some shadows walk in daylight and speak with pleasant voices. If the garments you wear could speak, what would they say? Do they carry the weight of peace or the static of unrest? Have you ever found yourself thinking or feeling things that seem unlike you when you wear a certain coat or wrap yourself in a particular shawl? That is not fantasy, that is feedback. The soul is not silent, it speaks in impressions. The spirit discerns more than the intellect ever could, if only we would listen. And it is not only clothing, but the spaces that house them, closets, drawers, trunks filled with old keepsakes, all of them potential nesting places for things unseen. Witches and warlocks of old knew the value of a token, not because of the material, what is a coin or string in itself, but because of what it can carry. Just as a letter can deliver words that shape a man's heart, so too can a thread carry intention that shapes his mood, his hunger, his desires. This is not mysticism, it is spiritual reality. And to dismiss it is to remain vulnerable to forces you pretend are not there. How strange, isn't it, that even a harmless accessory could function as a spiritual antenna, something as small as a bracelet, a beaded necklace, or even a decorative patch. These could become conduits, Not all are sinister, of course. Some carry the residue of love, of blessing, of memory. But some are counterfeits, mimics. They wear the skin of sentiment while carrying something far colder beneath. And once they are worn, even briefly, they make their claim on the soul. This is why cleansing is not merely physical. It must be spiritual. There is great wisdom in the old practice of prayer over garments, in the laying of hands on even the smallest object when it is brought into your home. It may seem quaint, but it is profoundly wise, for in so doing you declare authority, not superstition, not fear, but dominion. You decide what can remain and what must leave. You invite light into the folds where darkness might have hidden, and light, when invited, does not merely illuminate, it transforms. Still, many will scoff. They will say that such things are relics of another age, tales for trembling villagers huddled around firelight. But let them scoff, let them laugh, for the enemy always thrives where he is least believed, and I would rather be laughed at and protected than praised and unguarded. I would rather wear plain garments wrapped in truth than designer robes stitched with curses. The soul has its clothing too, you know, and it is always affected by what the body bears. The world is not as solid as we think it is. There are layers to everything, and what appears harmless may be anything but. But the good news, yes, there is good news, is that no object, no matter how charged or cursed, has the final word. Darkness is persistent, yes, but it is not permanent. The light is not intimidated by it. It merely waits to be welcomed. And where the light dwells, no witch, no spell, no charm can remain. But it begins with attention, with the courage to question what you've always assumed was just part of your life. The odd necklace you haven't taken off in years but can't explain why. The ring you found in a thrift store that makes your fingers cold. The jacket you inherited that seems to weigh more than it should. Look again. Ask again. Pray again. For the devil does not fear those who mock him. He fears those who see him. And once you begin to see him, not with your eyes, but with that deeper sense, that interior discernment that has been gifted to all but cultivated by few, you start to notice patterns. You realize the timing of your thoughts is not random. The wave of despair that greets you every time you wear a certain pair of shoes is not a coincidence. The sudden erosion of joy or motivation, the bitter dreams that return only when you sleep in that old nightshirt, the irritation that flares during prayer when you're wrapped in that inherited sweater, it all begins to make sense. These are not phantoms of imagination. They are signatures, evidence, markings of an invisible hand working its poison subtly, deliberately, through the ordinary. And how terribly ordinary it all is. That's the genius of it. A thread here, a clasp there, an embroidered sigil so stylized it looks like mere design. You may even have paid extra for it, not knowing you purchased more than cloth. You bought presents. Permission, a key handed unknowingly to the enemy, granting him access not to your wardrobe, but to your atmosphere. That is the real battleground, your atmosphere. Not just the air you breathe, but the tone that wraps around you, the emotional climate, the spiritual scent. Do you not know that spirits are drawn to atmospheres? Just as flies are drawn to rot and bees to nectar, so too do certain spirits cling to what resonates with them. Garments, when used maliciously, can be tuned like instruments. They can amplify lust, aggravate anger, depress joy, muddle clarity. They are, in the wrong hands, disguises for spiritual toxins. But perhaps the most sorrowful truth in all of this is that some souls grow used to it. They forget what clarity feels like. They assume the fog is normal. They accept the anxiety as part of life. They become married to their misery because they believe it is their personality, not their atmosphere, that is flawed. That is the enemy's final goal. not merely to oppress you, but to convince you it was always this way, to make you forget what freedom felt like. And so people walk through their lives draped in garments that do not belong to them in spirit, like kings wearing beggars' cloaks or warriors clad in chains that look like jewelry. They forget their posture, their purpose. They shuffle when they should stride. They whisper when they should declare. They exist instead of live. All because somewhere along the way something was hidden in their clothing, something they never noticed, never questioned, never resisted. There are those, even now, who remember. Some small flicker inside them is stirred as they hear these words. They do not know why, but their memory stirs. They recall the sudden change after that visit from an old friend, the tension that followed the wearing of a borrowed jacket, the unease they could never explain when they wore that vintage pendant passed down from a distant relative. Perhaps they even tried to rationalize it away, but the soul remembers. Even when the mind forgets, the soul keeps record. And this record can be reread. You can trace it. Patterns leave prints. God is not silent in these matters. He will not leave his people blind if they are willing to see. If you ask, if you seek, if you humble yourself enough to question even the most familiar of your possessions, you will begin to unravel the cords. You will begin to find the threads not of confusion, but of clarity, not of manipulation, but of liberation. For everything the enemy counterfeits, God authenticates. The enemy hides, God reveals. The enemy weaves in deception, God weaves in truth. And there are garments, oh yes, there are garments that carry blessing. Garments that inspire prayer, that warm the soul as well as the body. Robes of righteousness, mantles of calling. There are holy things, consecrated things, but these are never born of accident. They are chosen, blessed, stewarded. So too must you choose. Not all that clothes you should remain with you. Some things must be cast off. Some things must be burned, not with fear, but with purpose. You cannot carry destiny draped in defilement. You cannot walk into your next season wearing yesterday's curse. There are weights you've mistaken for fashion, burdens you've mistaken for nostalgia. Examine again, listen to the garment. What memories rise when you hold it? What emotion stirs when you wear it? Do you feel lighter or heavier, more alert or more dazed? These are not emotional quirks, they are signals. Follow them, and be wary especially of objects acquired in secrecy, clothing from mysterious sources, jewelry whose origin is unknown, accessories picked up from places steeped in darkness, certain markets, antique stores, foreign lands where idols are revered and sacrifices have been made. Witches delight in the careless exchange. They wait not for an invitation of words, but for the agreement of ignorance. What you take into your life without discernment, you give permission to without resistance. Some of these items have been prayed over by those who do not pray to the God of light. Their dedication was to powers that do not love, do not heal, do not redeem, and such dedication lingers. It echoes through time. That bracelet may be 50 years old, and yet the curse it carries remains fresh. Because in the spiritual world, time does not decay. Power, intention does. And dependency has, and if the intention behind an item was to curse, to bind, to sow destruction, then until that intention is broken, its work continues. Yes, even now, in the homes of the faithful, among the wardrobes of believers, hanging silently in closets, tucked away in drawers folded in sentimental boxes, ties passed from fathers who themselves were troubled, shawls from mothers who battled unseen forces, pieces taken from the estates of the dead, now draped over shoulders, unaware they carry more than memory. They carry momentum, spiritual momentum that pushes, pulls, shapes, and sometimes shackles. So now you stand at a threshold, not of fear, but of revelation. You are no longer ignorant. The veil has been lifted. What you do from this moment forward is no longer the result of blindness, but of choice, and that choice is sacred. You must decide whether to guard your garments or let them guard you poorly. You must decide whether to clothe yourself in holiness or wrap your soul in shadows stitched by unseen hands. You are not merely choosing fashion, you are choosing frequency, atmosphere, inheritance. The question is not only what you wear, but what you welcome. Do not treat lightly what the enemy takes seriously. If witches understand the power of a hidden object, should you not understand the power of purity? If they hide curses in the seams, will you not hide prayers in your garments? Will you not anoint what you wear, bless what you bring into your home, cleanse what has clung to you for too long? This is your wake-up call. Not all battles are fought in the open, and not all chains are visible. Some are soft, familiar, even beautiful, but they still bind. Today, cast off every garment laced with manipulation. Burn every token tied to torment. Cleanse your home, your wardrobe, your soul. Let what covers your body no longer conceal your enemy, but reflect your freedom. Because the kingdom to which you belong does not tolerate hidden darkness. It exposes, it purifies, it reclaims. So rise, warrior of light. Dress yourself not only in dignity, but in discernment. The days of casual living are over. You are being summoned to awareness. Cloak yourself in truth, robe yourself in prayer, and never again allow the enemy to rest on your shoulders without a fight.